Today we're going to cover two chapters. Well, actually, we're going to cover two PowerPoints. One of the things I need to remind you is that in order for us to finish this class, you need to do counseling. I want you to do, and we're going to have to do it online. You're going to have to either use emails or Zoom or Skype or telephone. You're going to need to call people on the telephone. Once upon a time, there was a lot of questions as to whether this type of counseling was viable or not. But we're going to talk about it with the first PowerPoint. It is viable, and I'll go through some of the things that we had to go through in order to get the once upon a time. Okay, so this program started in 2016. In 2017, we hired an individual that seemed like he was going to be a pretty good faculty member. Just kept causing problem after problem after problem. One fall in 2017, the fall of 2017, we had him signed up to teach Psych 240, Psych 291, Psych 350, several different psychology classes. One of them was Psych 291, the class you're taking right now. Unfortunately, the Friday before we started classes, he decided that he quit. He was upset with some of the things that were happening. And he was out at Tuba City. So since we couldn't travel back and forth, twice a week to Tuba City, it's kind of a long haul. We decided that we would teach counseling online. That was in 2017. Almost all of our classes were being taught. They were being taught face to face in 2017, and we really didn't have a choice at that point. We needed to teach counseling online. So I decided that the only way to do it. I was the one that took on the project, and the only way to do it. Of course, I had a weekend to figure this out. The only way that we could do it was to teach online and have people counsel online. Now, the question had come up at this point since there was so little happening as far as online classes. There was no Zoom at the college at the time. Since all of that was happening, what I did was I recorded all of the lectures and I put them online for the students to see. And the students that were in Saley, of course, they took the class face to face, and the students that were in Tuba City took the class online. And this is the first time that we talked about online counseling. But one of the things I discovered, I put this PowerPoint together to show the students that despite the fact that this wasn't something that we had planned, that it was a viable method of delivering counseling. And so that's where this came from. I just looked this up, the APA, and most of the articles that I'm going to talk about are still on the website. Despite the fact that COVID has been going on the pandemic has been around for 2 years, and there is very little face-to-face counseling taking place any place in the United States. They haven't really updated their online counseling website. It's still considered quite viable. If you look online, you can find many different places where you can get online counseling. There's no one that argues with it anymore. So I want you to start thinking of online counseling as a viable option for face-to-face counseling. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the things I need to remind you is that you need to get your character histories in. The history form is on the assignments page. You need to get that in. You need to create a character that can be counseled. This character can't have a problem that you've ever had in the past or a problem that is close to you. Let me explain this. One of the reasons I started studying psychology was because my first wife left me, and she left me with my two children. I was a single parent for 5 years, and I just couldn't figure out why in the world a mother would leave her children. Um, they just didn't make any sense to me. I didn't really treat her bad, not that I determined was bad anyway. I'm sure she probably talks really negatively about me. I certainly never hit her. I just wasn't as much fun as she thought I was going to be, and that's one of the reasons why she left. And I was trying to figure this out. Now the problem is that when I started doing counseling, if I had a woman that came in who was similar to my wife, had done the same thing that my wife had done, instead of me talking to my client, I was actually in my brain. I was talking to my ex-wife, and of course, it was very difficult for me to do that. So one of the things that we need to do is we first of all we need to resolve these conflicts we have in our own lives, so that we can do counseling with those individuals. And this is one of the reasons I tell you you need to be sure to stay away from a problem that you're close to, that your spouse has had, that you have had in your family, that you've dealt with in the past. So if it's a problem that you have had or a problem that you're close to, one of the things that may potentially happen if you select a problem that is similar to one that you've had in the past or one that you're close to, is that you will have a relapse, and we certainly don't want that to happen. So when you select a problem that for your character to have, you need to fill out the history and you need to write your paper on that problem. Now, you can talk about depression, you can talk about anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. I had one student that talked about transitioning from being one gender to another, being transgender, and the difficulty of that. Of course, they didn't weren't really doing that. Um, so I mean, you can select anything, and of course, since the pandemic is around us, all around us, then you might select something like depression from the pandemic, if of course you're not suffering from depression from the pandemic. Um, so that's one of the things that you need to do. You need to select a problem and create a character. The character shouldn't have your name, by the way. It needs to have a fictitious name. And once you get these in on the 10th week, we're going to start counseling. And if you haven't created a character by the 10th week, then you can't start counseling. So you need to get these in. Your paper, I wanted your papers in by March, I think, the beginning of March. The papers aren't as important as the character. You need to get the character in. You get 50 points for doing your character history. It's very difficult. It's impossible to pass the class without your character history, your paper, and your counseling sessions. There are 10 counseling sessions that you have to do. And that's 100 points. Your character history is 50 points, and your paper is another 100 points. So that's 250 points. If you decide that you're just going to take your quizzes and do the discussion questions, you're not going to have enough points to pass the class. You've got to do this in order to pass the class. We're going to talk about counseling online now, if I can get this thing started. I just looked this up in the APA website dealing with online counseling, and it's the same one that I saw in 2017. So it hasn't really changed. You would think that with the pandemic they would have updated this, but almost all the articles dealing with the efficacy of online counseling are from the 2008, 2009, and 2011. Psychologists commonly refer to any therapy delivered by telecommunication tools or devices as telepsychology. And I just looked this up. They're still calling it the same thing, telepsychology. You may hear it called web therapy, phone therapy, text therapy, or online therapy. Anytime you're interacting with a psychologist using a website, a phone, or a mobile app, you could be taking part in telepsychology services. Technology can contribute to an evolution in how people receive psychotherapy or work with a psychologist. Researchers are taking great interest in telepsychology and telehealth, evaluating how well it works, especially compared to in-person, in-office psychotherapy sessions. And of course, we have these concepts of tradition. Traditionally, all psychotherapy has to be face-to-face. The reality is that it doesn't. Education. We may be watching education change forever, and the future will not be the same as it was in the past. The idea was that you have to have students in seats. They have to be sitting there looking at you. And the reality may be that students don't need to be sitting in seats, and we don't need to be looking them in the eyes in order to teach them anything. Now, potentially, if you're listening to this, you're going, "Oh my God, he's not making any sense whatsoever." But that's okay. I can't see you making those faces, so make all the faces you want. You can't actually see me either. I guess I could. I could do this in a different way. But this seems to be working okay for me at this point. I've been teaching online for 20 years, so this is not really brand new for me. But much like the technology, the research is still new, and there is a lot science doesn't yet know. This has all changed. We're all using laptops now. Each one has a microphone. Each one has a camera. I'm pointing to my camera, of course, but in the old days, when we first started doing all of these things, the laptops were huge. They didn't have a camera, and they certainly didn't have a microphone. You had to attach them to your computer. So this is an old picture of a camera on top of a desktop. Very few laptops in the old days. Of course, the other thing was that there was no memory in laptops. They were just too small. They couldn't hold very much information. And now, of course, everything has just expanded amazingly. The first online classes that I taught, I was using floppy disks, and then we used CDs. Yeah, that's what they were. They were CDs, hard plastic. And then we went to jump drives. They hadn't invented jump drives yet. And I can remember the first jump drive I saw, what was it, 2003, 2004. The first jump drive I saw didn't have hardly any memory on it at all, but it was certainly better than the CD. One of the reasons was because CDs were difficult to erase. You could put something on them, but you couldn't take it off, and you had to burn one every time. Every time you created something new, you had to burn it on there. Now, of course, we've got jump drives, and jump drives are tiny. In the beginning, they were huge. And of course, they had invented USB ports at that point, but usually you had one USB port, so it was really kind of interesting. There are a few points to consider before signing up for any services that are offered exclusively online or by telephone. I had a colleague who was having problems, and she was too far away from a counselor to travel to see that counselor, and so she started doing telepsychology to help her, and it worked. It helped a lot. The other thing was that she was the kind of person that didn't didn't like people looking at her. It was really kind of interesting. I don't think that her therapy would have gone as well if she had been in a face-to-face situation. Because the individual wasn't looking at her, because she didn't feel like he was judging her, it was easier for her to do counseling, and she improved probably faster than she would have had she been in face-to-face counseling. It can be convenient. Online therapy can take less time away from the office or your workday, or worry about you having to worry about traffic. No need to travel miles to meet up with your psychologist, save on gas. Dial a number or log into a site, and the session can happen wherever you are comfortable. And of course, comfort is important. Going into a counselor's office can sometimes be nerve-wracking. If you can sit in your garage and do counseling, maybe it makes you feel better. Uh, when I was working on my master's degree for psychology, um, I had to take comprehensive examinations at the end of my program. And the first time I went in, I was in a suit and tie and whatnot. And I just did a terrible job on my comps. The next time I went in a softball uniform, and I'm a pretty good softball player, and I always feel relaxed in a softball uniform. So I took my comps in a softball uniform, and of course, I passed my comps the second time around. I probably should have passed them the first time around, but didn't feel comfortable. The more comfortable I felt, the easier it was for me to answer tough questions. Compared to traditional in-person therapy, it can sometimes appear less expensive. Some apps will advertise pricing that provides unlimited use for a weekly or monthly fee, or the online session may seem significantly lower than in-office visits. If you're not interested in using health insurance for psychotherapy, this can be a benefit. Once upon a time, there were no insurance companies that covered mental health issues or therapy. Then they started covering them. And of course, they're always looking for ways not to have to pay for something. So they would handle the face-to-face therapy, but not the online therapy. Now, of course, all therapy is considered the same. Online communication is very comfortable for many people, especially younger adults or those who use technology often. More people are using email, webinars, and text messaging to communicate, and it can seem more comfortable or easier than talking to someone in person, especially when revealing personal or private information. It can provide access to those who can't get to an office. In some rural communities, like on the Navajo Nation, the nearest psychologist office may be an hour or two drive away. And I'll have to admit that if I needed to go in and see a doctor, I would have to drive all the way to Gallup. From Saley, that was about an hour and 15-minute trip, depending on how fast I'm driving, and I shouldn't be driving quite that fast, but everybody else does, so why not me? Some people with chronic illnesses or disabilities may not be able to drive or be easily able to leave their home. In these situations, web or telephone-based therapy may be their only option for help. The research hasn't yet shown that standalone therapy online or via texting is effective for everyone in every situation. Some sites advertise that they offer therapy, but those claims may be misleading or false. For example, the people behind the apps may not be licensed or qualified to provide therapy. Licenses are granted by each state with their own laws and rules, much like each state determines what residents must know to earn a driver's license. But unlike driver's licenses, which allow you to legally operate a car in all states, a healthcare provider is limited to providing services in the state in which they are licensed. And I've been licensed in Oklahoma and Nebraska and Montana, but I'm not licensed in Arizona. As a matter of fact, I'm not licensed at all now because I don't do therapy. But I've been licensed in different places, but just because I have a license in Nebraska doesn't mean that it would be honored. It certainly wouldn't be honored in Oklahoma or in Montana. The provider must be licensed in the jurisdiction where they are located, and making that determination may be difficult to do if you don't know where he or she is physically located. Psychotherapy works in part because psychologists ensure that clients have a safe, private space to share deeply personal and sometimes difficult stories, thoughts, or emotions. What happens and is said in a therapy office stays there with the exception of a few situations. The site or app you use should, at a minimum, be HIPAA compliant and have the ability to verify your identity and your therapist's identity. HIPAA is the law that states that hospitals must be confidential. All information at a hospital must be confidential, like your records. Nobody can see your records. Many insurance companies cover the treatment of mental health and substance abuse disorders, but online therapy or web therapy services are often not covered or reimbursable by most insurance providers. It is now that we've gone through the pandemic, most insurance companies consider online therapy the same as face-to-face therapy. A total of this is research that has been done looking at online therapy, comparing online therapy to face-to-face therapy. It had to do with an intervention for depression using cognitive behavioral therapy. A total of 62 participants suffering from depression were randomly assigned to the therapist-supported internet-based intervention group, 32 people, and to a face-to-face intervention. There were 30 of those. The 8-week interventions were based on cognitive behavioral therapy principles. These are little girls, but there's exactly 62 people in this picture, and that's why I put it in there. It's not that they're all depressed. As a matter of fact, they look pretty happy to me. The intention to treat analysis yielded no significance between group difference, online versus face-to-face group, for any of the pre to post treatment measurements. At post-treatment, both treatment conditions revealed significant symptom changes compared to before the intervention. Okay, this is another article dealing with panic disorder, once again using cognitive behavioral therapy. A total of 113 consecutive patients were randomly assigned to 10 weeks of either guided internet therapy using cognitive behavioral therapy. There were 53 of those, or group therapy using the same method, and that was 60 people in the second group. After treatment and at a 6-month follow-up, patients were again assessed by the psychiatrist blind to treatment condition. They found no statistically significant differences between the two treatment conditions using a mixed models approach to account for missing data. Groups cognitive behavioral therapy utilized considerably more therapist time than did internet cognitive behavioral therapy, and that was the only difference. 2 new studies suggest online therapy may be effective for treating mental health issues. Online therapy is increasingly popular, particularly among people who live in rural areas and cannot easily get to a therapist's office or who are concerned about the costs of in-person therapy. New technology may pose some concerns about the security of online therapy. It continues to be an issue, but research suggests the benefits may be significant. The first study published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal reviewed studies of online cognitive behavioral therapy conducted between 2000 and 2012. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a widely used and well-researched form of therapy, with most studies saying in-person forms of this treatment are highly effective. Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on reducing negative thoughts, thereby changing behavior and alleviating symptoms. This is the way cognitive behavioral therapy works. You've got a problem, you've created a situation, you have negative thoughts about that situation. The negative thoughts cause emotion, and that causes a negative behavior. So what cognitive behavioral therapy tries to do is once you develop a problem, they try to control these negative thoughts. And if they can control the negative thoughts, then you don't have the negative emotions, which doesn't, which, and that alleviates the negative behavior because you're not having the negative thoughts or the negative emotions. That's the essence behind cognitive behavioral therapy. Most of the studies track participants for a relatively short period of time after undergoing therapy, ranging from 8 weeks to about 2 years. Researchers found online cognitive behavioral therapy could effectively reduce symptoms of depression and other mental health issues. In some cases, online cognitive behavioral therapy was even more effective than traditional in-person therapy. Most online cognitive behavioral therapy sessions focused on short-term goals and symptom relief. Because the studies did not track participants for an extended period of time, the researchers do not know if the symptoms were permanently alleviated. The team that conducted the analysis cautions that some human connection is lost with online therapy, but they also say the evidence supporting online therapy's effectiveness is significant. Another study published in the Journal of American Medical Association Psychiatry looked at how online therapy affects well-being of new doctors. Young doctors often work long hours, including nights and weekends, and the stress of those long shifts can lead to mental health issues such as depression and suicidal thoughts. One previous study found that suicidal thoughts increased fourfold during a medical residency. Researchers looked at 200 first-year medical residents working 80-hour weeks and overnight shifts. Compared to doctors who received no online therapy, doctors who received 4 30-minute online sessions before beginning their residency had fewer suicidal thoughts. Because the sessions were delivered online, researchers say it might be possible to provide such treatment to other doctors while still keeping costs low. And that is the end of that. Okay, so let's get rid of this and we'll go to here. Okay. We're also going to tackle chapter 5 today. It looks like a long chapter, but it's actually, we talk a lot about movies. So how in the world do we develop a working relationship? Chapter 5. A practitioner should begin a professional relationship by determining how they will present themselves and how they will behave. It is important for the practitioner to set aside their personal feelings and concerns in order to fully focus on their client. And I was talking about my own problem with my first wife. Those were my own personal feelings. That's one of the reasons I got into psychology. It's something that I needed to deal with before I got into therapy. And I, recognizing the fact that I had this potential difficulty, I tried to stay away from those types of situations that would bring forth those negative ideas for me. And of course, eventually I worked through my problem and I could counsel people. Looking at what I needed to do was turn off my own idea of what the problem might potentially be, and just deal with their situation. Certainly, no female who had left her children had the same situation that I did, and that's what I needed to recognize. So you need to take your own problems and deal with them so that they won't affect the problem in the future. I had a colleague who started a counseling program. She was a cognitivist, and she decided she wanted to do counseling. So she started working. She got into a counseling program, and the first class she took, they told her that she had too many problems in her past, and she needed to deal with those before she could do counseling. And what she discovered was that she had not worked through her problems, and that she needed to deal with these before she could get into the counseling problem. And she never was able to get into the counseling program because she couldn't deal with her past. She didn't want to. She was a psychologist. She thought that she had all the right answers, but she didn't have any of the answers for her because hadn't dealt with them. So she started doing counseling, and eventually she quit because she thought she was smarter than her problems were, and of course she still has those problems because she didn't properly deal with them. It is important that a practitioner accepts and understands the client's beliefs, their perceptions, their stereotypes, their biases, their prejudices, and their life experiences. No matter who the person is, their life experiences are very much different from yours. If somebody had lived a similar life to me, just the fact that I was raised in Indiana on a farm probably makes my life experiences completely different. I grew up in a family of 6 children. I have an older brother, and if you talk to him about about his upbringing, he would say all these positive things. But of course, his life experiences weren't the same as mine. And because of that, despite the fact that we grew up in the same household at exactly the same time, my experiences with what happened to us while we were growing up were completely different. He was given a lot more freedom. He had a bicycle at a relatively young age, and he was gone a lot. And he dealt with different things than I did. I worked around the house more. I worked on the farm while he was off riding his bicycle around the neighborhood. So our life experiences were completely different. I broke one arm when I was in the 8th grade, and I broke the other arm when I was a junior in high school. No, I was a freshman in high school. I broke my other arm, and he's never broken a bone. And here I've broken each arm once, which is fairly traumatic. Anyway, so this is one of the things that we need to understand, the fact that you may have been through similar things, but their life experiences are different. Their prejudices against uh, different things may be different than yours, certainly. And of course, we need to accept them for who they are. And that's one of the reasons why we need to find out what their beliefs, their perceptions, their stereotypes, their biases, their prejudices are. And if we understand their life experiences, potentially we understand all of these things. The core interpersonal qualities that a practitioner brings to a relationship includes their warmth. They need to respect, and I can't say this strongly enough. You need to respect your client. If you don't respect your client, if you don't like your client, then you're not going to be able to help them. You need to be genuine. You can't lie to your client. You need to be empathic, and you need to accept your client for who they are. Trust can be developed by being understanding or empathic, listening attentively, and showing respect. Warmth, being kind and accepting in a non-judgmental way. Expression of warmth in one culture may be perceived differently in another culture. Cheek touching is commonly used to show warmth in many cultures around the world. This is very common in France. It's something that people make fun of on cartoons because people in the United States don't do that. When I was working in Montana on the Fort Belknap Reservation, the natives up there are big huggers. So if you go to a powwow, it always ends in people hugging each other, and sometimes they hug every time they leave, or they hug when you get there. It's really kind of interesting. When I came to the Navajo Nation, I thought, well, I've been dealing with American Indians in Montana. It's probably the same. And the reality is that it's not the same. Navajos don't hug nearly as much as they do up in Montana. And that's not just the Gros Ventre and the Assiniboine. That's also the Sioux of Fort Peck. That's also the Cheyenne and the Crow, the Salish and Kootenai, and the Chippewa Cree. Actually, Chippewa Cree don't really hug that much, but they're Canadian, so they're just a little bit different. They grew up a little bit different. And actually, they've been in the United States for a couple of generations now. But the Chippewa Cree came down from Canada in at the beginning of the 20th century, and they were given a reservation in Montana. Not that that's important at all. But my point is that different cultures show warmth in different ways, and this is a good example. Some people hug, some people kiss, some people bow. This is that's from Cambodia. This is Japanese. The Japanese don't bring their hands up. Some say goodbye, some shake hands. And there you go. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's emotions, feelings, thoughts, and behavior from that person's viewpoint. As we attune to another person's internal state, a feeling of being connected develops. Being empathic involves having the willingness and flexibility to put yourself in the other person's reality. And that is not easy. Their reality may not be the same as your reality, but being empathic means that you understand what their reality is. Empathy is understanding assumptions, beliefs, and/or worldview. Empathy requires understanding another person's subjective experience while maintaining the capacity to differentiate from that person. Empathy is not the same as pity or sympathy. Pity involves sorrow or grief aroused by someone else's suffering, while sympathy involves feeling affected by whatever affected the other person. Respect, this is really important. Respect is the most important thing that you can give to your client. And if you don't respect your client, then you're probably in the wrong field. Respect or unconditional positive regard is expressed by affirming and appreciating clients without condoning their harmful behaviors. You should always look for the good, regard for thoughts, feelings, and abilities, noticing, acknowledging, and highlighting clients' strengths, capabilities, resilience, coping ability, potential, and resources. Being polite and following appropriate cultural norms. You show respect by following their cultural norms, acknowledging their cultural norms. Genuineness, being sincere and authentic, being real and allowing your humanness and uniqueness to be seen, being natural, honest, and forthright, and admitting your mistakes. And this is really tough for some people, admitting their mistakes. Offering it some common mistakes that people make. Offering advice is a mistake. It is inappropriate to offer advice until you have fully understood the people involved, their challenges and situation, and collaborated with the clients on setting goals. Offering advice before you know what the clients have already tried can be experienced as not respecting their strengths and capacity. So offering advice, not a good idea. You need to stay away from offering advice, especially early in your relationship with your client. Reassuring is another common mistake. In an attempt to reduce pain, the pain the client feels about their problem can motivate them to solve the problem. So if you're reassuring them, you're trying to take the pain away, and sometimes it's the pain that gets them to do what they need to do. Negating the importance of the client's pain can lead them to feel that they are not fully understood or respected. Once again, so be careful of reassuring. For example, telling someone it will all work out in the end. Don't worry about it indicates capacity to stop worrying on command. So reassuring should be stayed away from, just like giving advice. Another common mistake is offering excuses. What you need to do is help your clients set goals, not offer excuses. Asking leading questions is another common mistake. Questions, especially if they are questions that actually give advice. Uh, Stay away from that. Dominating through teaching. Teaching is dominating or pushy. It can suggest one right way to do things. Communicating in a dominating way tends to invite people to feel shamed or rebellious and to withdraw or become defensive and argue. It implies there is only one way to resolve an issue, and that is your way, and you need to stay away from that. My wife has a cousin. It's not really my cousin, it's her cousin. She was a special ed teacher, and the way she taught was that there was one way to do everything, and that was, she was dealing with individuals that didn't have a lot of skill. So that's the way she lived, and she's still living that way. There's only one way, and that's her way, and it's either her way or the highway. So you need to be careful of teaching. Labeling is another common mistake. It's a sophisticated way to judge, criticize, or blame another person, and it is not helpful. Another common mistake is interrogating. Why questions are particularly problematic because they sometimes imply judgment and also invite defensiveness. Core interpersonal qualities, developing your ability to be empathic, reading novels and professional literature about people from different backgrounds is a good way to develop empathy. Joining in activities, talking to and getting to know others who have different experiences. Attending classes or workshops focused on specific groups of people. Traveling to different countries and spending time with local residents. Doing volunteer work in communities or neighborhoods very different from your own. Watching popular movies about people who are different from you. These are all good ways to develop empathy for your client and the person that they may happen to be. So how in the world do you find out about people that are different? Well, one of the ways that before I came down to the Navajo Nation to teach at Saley, I read books about the Dene people. I read Tony Hillerman, and a lot of people say, "Oh, Tony Hillerman, he's some white guy. He was talking about all these Navajo people." Well, the reality was that he was very respectful of the Dene people, and a lot of the things that he said were fairly accurate. Of course, I mean, you can't read anything and assume that that is always the way it is. There are very few pieces of literature that way. I read the book that Monty Russell took the pictures for. I can't think of the name of it. I think it's The Dene People or something. That blue book. I read that book as well. I've got just a ton of books. I've got Navajo History by Ace Ackery. I've got Navajos Wear Nikes. What else do I have? I've got just a ton of books that I've read. I read, who gave me? One of my colleagues gave me a book called Laughing Boy by Lafarge. I read that one as well. But anyway, that's what you need to do. You need to find out as much as you can. And assuming, of course, that these aren't absolutes, that this knowledge is not absolute, that you'll have to take it all with a grain of salt. Now we're going to talk about some of the movies that you can watch. This is a good way to get information. Movies they last for however long they last. Usually, it's an hour and a half to 2 hours or whatever. But it's a good way to get immersed in a different culture. Here's a movie called Real Women Have Curves. It's about second generation Mexican American females. If you know anything about the Hispanic culture, um, Hispanic culture sees women who are curvy as attractive. It doesn't really matter, they're not really talking about weight. What they're talking about is wide hips and prominent breasts is what they're talking about. So real women have curves is about the Hispanic culture. It's really kind of fascinating. So if we were looking at if a Hispanic male was watching Victoria's Secret, their angels, they would think that they weren't very attractive because of course they're not very curvy. They're kind of skinny, very slender. Hoop Dreams. This is about Los Angeles. Real women have curves. I've actually never seen this movie. Hoop Dreams is about inner city African American boys. This was filmed in Chicago, I believe. Actually, I have never seen that one either. Mystic River is about inner city white boy who is sexually abused. It's actually out of the Boston area. Actually, Mystic River. Anyway, uh, it's about a boy that was raped by another man. White teenage girl. This is Girl Interrupted. This is Angelina Jolie's breakout role, and it was Winona Ryder's breakout role as well. And it's called Girl Interrupted. It's about a white teenage girl who is mentally ill, and one of the girls commits suicide in the end. I can't remember which one. Never actually seen that movie. American History X is about a white boy in a neo-Nazi group. If you want to know about neo-Nazis in the United States and the concept of white supremacy, then American History X is probably a really good movie for you to watch. I've never seen it because I know too much about neo-Nazis anyway. They really upset me. Bend It Like Beckham is really like this movie. This is Keira Knightley's first movie. It's about a second generation Indian girl living in London. And if you want to know about the Indian culture, this is really good. They're actually Sikhs, and it explains the Indian culture in England, and you can see how the Indian culture is different from the English culture. It's really kind of fascinating. I Am Sam is about a developmentally disabled individual. That's Sean Penn's character. I've never seen this movie either. Radio I've seen. This is a good movie. Cuba Gooding Jr. has a developmental disability, and he becomes a icon for their football team. My Family, Mi Familia, is about a Mexican American family living in Los Angeles and the traumas that they have. What's Eating Gilbert Grape? This is a movie with Johnny Depp and Leonardo DiCaprio when he was very, very young. It's about a white rural family dealing with issues related to poverty, autism, obesity, depression, and suicide. And I think it's Leonardo DiCaprio's character that has autism, and the mother is obese, um, and I think she's depressed, and they are poor, and they live on the wrong side of the tracks and whatnot. Soul Food is about an African American family facing serious illness and death. Sleeping with the Enemy is a famous movie with Julia Roberts where she's being physically abused by her husband, and I can't remember who plays her husband. Anyway, she's struggling with this. She fakes her own death and runs away, and then he finds her. What's Love Got to Do with It? About Tina Turner. Ike Turner was physically abusive to her, and so this is a movie about Ike and Tina Turner. The Notebook. I've never actually seen this, but my wife tells me I need to watch it. It's about people facing challenges related to aging. The Notebook is something that they wrote. Somebody wrote a diary, one of the two of them, I guess, And then they're reading it as the wife is dying of cancer, I think. So they go back in time and they remember their love and whatnot. James Garner's in this movie. Ryan Gosling is in the movie. I can't remember what her name is. Stewart. Anyway, On Golden Pond is about people facing challenges related to aging. It's got this is Katharine Hepburn and Henry Fonda's last movie. This is the only movie that Jane Fonda made with her father, and it won 3 Academy Awards. Driving Miss Daisy is about people facing challenges related to aging. Kind of a fun movie. Um, it's about race as well because Jessica Tandy is a older white rich lady, and the Morgan Freeman is her chauffeur, and she learns about race and whatnot from him. Iris, I've never seen this movie. It's about people facing challenges related to aging. 28 Days is about women with drug and alcohol problems. Uh, this is really a good movie about treatment for alcohol abuse. She and the other interesting part about this movie is it shows that some individuals are enablers, partners of people that are alcoholics. A lot of times they're enablers, and there's a method to their madness. One of the reasons that they are enablers is because they like the person when they're drunk, and sometimes it's because they can control them, and other times it's just because, well, in this case, it's because she was more pleasant and potentially she was uh, more pliable, easier to manipulate. The Sandra Bullock character. Losing Isaiah is about women with drug and alcohol problems. Halle Berry has Isaiah, the baby, and Jessica Lange is the individual that takes care that gains custody of the child because Halle Berry is a drug addict and she's an alcoholic, and Jessica Lange. Um, Eventually, I think the two got together, and she allowed Halle Berry to help take care of Isaiah after she had cleaned up, of course. When a Man Loves a Woman, this is Andy Garcia and Meg Ryan. It's about women with drug and alcohol problems. This is another situation where he liked her the way she was when she was a drunk, and he didn't like her when she was sober. Even though, this was a much more positive situation, she changed her personality, changed, and he didn't like that person. Gracie's Choice is about women with drug and alcohol problems. I've never actually seen this one. Boys Don't Cry is about people dealing with issues related to discrimination and sexual orientation. And this one, Hilary Swank is a lesbian, and I think she's transgender, but I'm not really sure. I've never actually seen this movie. Um, they get attacked in the end. Boys on the Side is about people dealing with issues related to discrimination and sexual orientation. One of the individuals is gay. Another individual is dying of HIV. It's really kind of a fascinating movie. Philadelphia is about people dealing with issues related to discrimination, sexual orientation. This movie came out, this is one of Tom Hanks' Academy Award winning performances. This came out when HIV was fairly new, and he plays a lawyer who is suing who's suing to get his job back. He is dying from AIDS, and it's a very good movie. Brokeback Mountain it deals with people dealing with issues related to discrimination, sexual orientation. Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger are cowboys that are having a homosexual affair. I've never actually seen this movie, so I'm not really sure what happens in it, but I know that has to do with sexual orientation. It has to do with the fact that they're homosexual and they're having a homosexual relationship. Um, and this is, of course, before um, gay marriage was legalized. The Crying Game is a really old, kind of an old movie. It's people dealing with issues related to discrimination and sexual orientation. This individual is actually transgender, and that's what it's all about. This is before transgender was even a possibility. This is a male who dresses and acts like a female, and this individual falls in love with him slash her without knowing that it's actually a male. It's really kind of an interesting movie. People dealing Desert Hearts. I've never seen this one. People dealing with issues related to discrimination and sexual orientation. Longtime companion. It's another situation like the what we've been talking about. Milk was Harvey Milk was a politician in San Francisco. He was the first openly gay politician in San Francisco. There was eventually he and the mayor get murdered by this guy that decided that homosexuals should not be in politics, but it's about discrimination and sexual orientation again. As good as it gets, a white man is dealing with obsessive compulsive disorder. He's also dealing with a neighbor who is gay that he can't accept. And that's part of his obsessive compulsive disorder, that everything has to be exactly the same. He doesn't accept homosexuality as a acceptable way of living. And oddly enough, he breaks through his obsessive compulsive disorder because he falls in love with the other gentleman's dog. So that is kind of interesting. In the end, it changes everything. He has to adjust his mind because in the beginning, of course, one of the things he did, he dumped the dog down the trash chute because the dog didn't fit in his world. But then he falls in love with the dog when he has to take care of the dog. Anyway, interesting movie. A Beautiful Mind is about a white man with schizophrenia. I've never seen that movie. Children of a Lesser God is about a white woman who is deaf. That's Marlee Matlin. She won an Academy Award for this movie. It's kind of an old movie, but it tells about what she has done in order to survive in a hearing world when she is deaf, and what sacrifices she has to make. My Left Foot is about a man with cerebral palsy. That's Daniel Day-Lewis. This is his first Academy Award for Best Actor. Um, I've never actually seen that movie. Green Mile is about men in prison. Dead Man Walking is also about men in prison. That's Sean Penn. He's on death row. This guy's on death row as well, and that's what it's about. The last days of both individuals. Shawshank Redemption is about men in prison. Saint of Fort Washington is about people that are homeless. Monsters Ball is the struggles of a single African American mother. Her husband's being executed, and Billy Bob Thornton and Heath Ledger are the individuals that are with him. They work at the prison, and they are with him when he's executed. Heath Ledger and Billy Bob Thornton are Billy Bob is Heath Ledger's father, and Heath Ledger commits suicide because he can't handle dealing with people that killed themselves, or with the suicide of this guy, who he doesn't think should have been executed. And then Billy Bob falls in love with Halle Berry. It's really kind of an odd movie. Interesting movie. African American man who is homeless. This is the soloist. He has schizophrenia and is a talented musician. So it's about schizophrenia. The Joy Luck Club is a second generation Asian American women and how they try to bridge the gap between the old world and the new world, living in America and being Chinese. Eat, Drink, Man, Woman is challenges of a Taiwanese family. Amrika is about a divorced Palestinian woman and her son. I've never seen this one either. Rhapsody in August is about a Japanese children visiting their grandmother who lived through the bombing of Nagasaki. Never seen that one either. Here's one that everybody's seen, Stand and Deliver. It's about a teacher in a low-income Hispanic neighborhood. Lou Diamond Phillips, of course, is in the movie. Four Little Girls is about the bombing of a church, black church in Birmingham that killed four little girls. It's about the challenges African Americans have to face. Do the Right Thing. This is actually a Spike Lee movie, and so is Do the Right Thing. It's about challenges of an African American that African Americans have to face. It's one of his first movies. Ghosts of Mississippi is about challenges that African Americans have to face. It's about the civil rights movement in Mississippi. Real tough times. I've lived in Mississippi, and I can tell you that there is still, the tensions are still going on. The Long Walk Home is challenges of African Americans have to face. It's about the Birmingham bus strike that African Americans, they had a strike against riding buses, and it lasted for about 18 months. But they wouldn't ride buses anymore, and because of that, the bus line lost so much money they had to close down. But the reason they were doing it was because they wouldn't let them ride in the front of the bus. They had to ride in the back of the bus. And if there were more white people that wanted to get on and the bus was full, black people had to get off. So they were protesting against that. The Celebration is about an upper middle class Danish multi-generational family dealing with incest and violence. I've never seen this one. It's kind of an old movie. Yesterday is about rural African family, both parents having HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. Tuesdays with Maury is about a white man diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. Here's one everybody's seen. Rain Man is about a white man diagnosed as an autistic savant. The autistic individual is Dustin Hoffman, and of course Tom Cruise is his brother. Lars and the Real Girl is about a white man dealing with mental illness. There's Ryan Gosling again. Cyrus is about a single white mother who has devoted her life to her 21-year-old son. John C. Reilly is the boyfriend. Jonah Hill is Cyrus. He has developmental problems. And Marissa Tomei, of course, is the mother. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly is about a white man adapting to being mute and paralyzed. Pieces of April is about a white middle-class family, oldest daughter estranged from family. Mother is ill and dying, and she has aging grandparents. Precious, this is an Academy Award-winning movie. It's about an African-American teenager living on welfare, pregnant as a result of incest. And as you can see, Monique, this is Monique. She was also overweight. The Namesake, I've actually seen this movie. This is a really good movie. If you want to know about India and their culture and the way they do things, Namesake is an excellent movie to watch. It's about a first-generation Indian man. He's born in India, and he immigrates to the United States after he gets married. He's in an arranged marriage. And in India, of course, it's one thing, but once he comes to the United States, his culture seems to get in the way of just about everything that he wants to accomplish. And of course, the wife is struggling with her new freedom that she didn't have in India. It's just a really fascinating movie. City Island is about a white blue collar family dealing with a grown son who has recently been released from prison. As It Is in Heaven is about a white Swedish community with issues related to the impact of bullying on a child and domestic violence. Strangely enough, bullying is a common practice in elementary schools in Sweden. Have a terrible problem with bullying. It has no one's exactly sure. They don't know how to control it, and they don't know if they want to control it. It's really kind of an odd situation, odd culture, different culture than what we have in the United States, where bullying is accepted. Winter's Bone is about a poor white Appalachian family, father missing and mother mentally ill. Good Night, Mr. Tom is about a white British family, single, mentally ill mother, neglect and abuse of children. Children of Heaven is about a poor Iranian family struggling to manage. American Beauty is about a family facing challenges. Real odd movie. Kevin Spacey is the father, and Annette Bening is the mother. The two become estranged. She kicks him out of her bed. He starts living in the garage and lifting weights, and he starts fantasizing about his teenage next door neighbor. She's the American Beauty. And it's really kind of an interesting movie, kind of a shocking movie, because he keeps having these fantasies about this girl, her coming over and seducing him. Of course, that doesn't happen, but real interesting movie. Lost in Translation is challenges faced by white adults. The white adults. This is Scarlett Johansson is the female lead in this movie. Um, they're in Japan, and because Japan has a different culture, they're dealing with not only the cultural differences, but also the fact that they're aging. He's aging, of course, and Scarlett Johansson is younger, of course. But that's part of the problem that they're having. Up in the Air is challenges faced by white adults. It's got George Clooney in it. Life as a House is about challenges faced by white adults. I've never seen this movie. Million Dollar Baby, Hilary Swank, I think, won an Academy Award for this movie. It's about challenges faced by white adults. It's also got Morgan Freeman in it. So she wants to be a boxer, and so Clint Eastwood decides he's going to train her. And the reality, and his corner man is Morgan Freeman. So he has never trained a female boxer before, and they get into the whole fight game with he's trained male boxers but never female boxers. Really fascinating movie. Edward Scissorhands. I don't know why anybody had ever watched this movie. Challenges faced by white adults. It's got Johnny Depp as an individual who has scissors and knives as prosthesis on his hands. I probably need to watch this movie. It seems so silly to me, but anyway. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is about challenges faced by white adults. It has Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, Kirsten Dunst, Mark Ruffalo, Elijah Wood, and Tom Wilkinson in it. I've never actually seen this movie, but I think that Jim Carrey. This is not a comedy movie. You can erase someone from your mind, getting them out of your heart. It's another story. Okay. Now we're going to talk about American Indian movies. Powwow Highway is about American Indian adults seeking understanding on a road trip to rescue a relative. Never actually seen this one before. Looks like it takes place in the Southwest. Smoke Signals is about an American Indian teenagers from Washington seeking understanding on a road trip to find their father, and they come down to the Navajo Nation to find his father. Anyway, this one looks like it takes place here. Skins, I've never seen this one either. It's about American Indian adults battle greed and displacement in Sioux country. And one that I just recently saw, a really good movie, is Wind River. So if you can find it on television, it's a really good movie. It's about the Wind River Reservation, which is in Wyoming, and dealing with some of the problems they have there. Of course, it's really cold. It's in the winter time and it's really cold. And a murder takes place of a American, an Indian um, teenage girl, and they try to figure out what's going on. Of course, the first people they blame are relatives of hers, but then it turns out that it's has to do with people that are pumping gas out of the land. It's really kind of a fascinating movie. Kind of violent if you don't like violence. Anyway, that's it. If you guys probably know more movies than I do. A lot of these are dated movies, so don't, you'd only see them on TMC or something. But movies are a great way to find out about other cultures. Reading novels is another way of finding out about other cultures. And I'll see you next week.